Star Wars Outlaws is a game that a lot of people have a lot of strong opinions on, and I don't know how exactly I feel about this game. So let's just get right into the discussion on it. So, my overall thoughts on Star Wars Outlaws is kind of confusing. So, I started off the game very excited, and the general premise of being this sort of neutral outlaw, this person that has no connection to the Rebel Alliance, no connection to the Jedi, to the Sith, to the Empire, just literally just a normal person in this Star Wars universe that just is just trying to just survive in all of this stuff. And so the main character, Kay Vess, is an outlaw, as the name of the game would imply. And so I really liked that idea of, just like I said, just being kind of disconnected from everything, but being in the Star Wars universe, because there's so many just fun, awesome things in the Star Wars universe that just being a part and just existing in it without even being a force user or anything like that. That's just There's a lot of fun to be had there. So the overall premise of that was really exciting getting into the game. The little bits of like the trailers and like gameplay footage that I've seen seems pretty fun and interesting. I mean, there's stealth portions, there's moments where you're riding various vehicles through like Tatooine or through different planets, and the fact that you can visit different planets and fly around and stuff like that. It's really it has all of the bones of the kind of Star Wars game that I would have wanted to see growing up, and there's a lot of hits and misses with this game. So going into some things about the story that I like. So the story itself, as I've said, is about Kay Vess. She is an outlaw, and basically the whole premise of the game, without going into any spoilers, is that she is just trying to clear her name. Some things happened, and she's ultimately trying to clear her name, and she has to go through this whole big adventure to get things in, I guess, proper order, or at least to clear her name, to fix the things that kind of went wrong with that. And myself, this game just came out like 2 days ago, really a day ago, I think. I don't know, depending on when I actually released this video. The game just came out, and I'm a couple hours into it, so I'm past the opening section. I'm past the first major job that is what this pretty much this whole game is based off of. So these are just kind of my initial impressions of the story, and I have no idea how it's going to end and anything like that. But the story is interesting. So again, the fact that it's this unrelated person that is really neutral third party to everything going on, is there's a lot to be had there, and there's a lot to enjoy in that. She's not beholden to the Rebel Alliance morality and the choices that they make, or she's not trying to she's not a force wielder, so she isn't trying to decide if she's on the light side or the dark side of the force. She's not just a crony for the Empire. I mean, she's just her own person. So the individual character I like, and the setting is very interesting. So the time period where this takes place is in between Episode 5 and Episode 6. So that's The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, of the original trilogy, and that has always been one of the most interesting times for me, between everything that sort of the cliffhanger of the movie of Empire Strikes Back, and just the Empire sort of being at the height of their power and their reach, with hope being at its lowest. It was amazing how the cliffhanger just literally left off like that. And so that time period has always been so interesting, because yeah, it would just be a scary time to live in. And so the game being based in this time period is very interesting to me. Being able to experience that time period for, I think, probably the first time in any Star Wars game, at least to my memory. Um, and the settings itself, as far as like the cities that you're in, the planets that you're visiting, are very fascinating. So the world building with the different characters that you can run into in the streets is great. I mean, this feels like something that is in the Star Wars universe. It's not just a game that could have been, any other kind of universe, any other kind of IP, and they just slapped Star Wars on it. Like, it feels like it's actually part of the universe. It feels like, I mean, obviously, take time period out of the equation here. It feels like when you walk into a bar, you could see Han Solo just sitting down at the bar there. You could be walking around the streets and you could see, Luke with like his Jedi robe just walking through the streets, or it just the places and the atmosphere really feel like Star Wars, which I really enjoy. But part of the issue that I have with the story, at least, is that I just don't really care for the character and her motivations for what she's doing, at least in the initial part of the game. In the initial part of the game, she's kind of starting off in her, where she lives, and she's going off to go do this one thing, and then something goes wrong there, and then there's an issue, with some other people. And again, I'm trying to dance around spoilers here because I don't want to spoil it for anyone. But just in the initial like hour to like 2 hours of the game, I'm not really feeling any kind of like motivation for why this character is doing anything. I can comprehend what's happening on screen. It's not like it's confusing or visually uninteresting, but it's just not as gripping as I would think that it should be. In the fact that it's just, there's no motivation, there's no, you don't really feel any kind of connection with the characters. There's one character that is supposed to elicit a emotional response, at least somewhat of an emotional response, when something happens to them in like the first like 30 minutes of the game. But I can't for the life of me care about what that was. And so yeah, I don't know. The character Kay Vess, the fact that she is unrelated to, both sides, as I've said a couple of times in this video already, her motivations and the idea of Kay Vess is the interesting part. Kay Vess in reality and in application is very uninteresting. So there's a weird duality going on with not only the story and the characters, but also a lot of other things in the game. So earlier I had mentioned that like the world building feels great and the characters feel, very lived in. Like it feels like when you're walking through the city streets and they're packed, and the atmosphere just feels very much, this is Star Wars, right? But the characters at the same time, like in speaking with characters, it just feels so stiff and robotic and almost lifeless. And it's just so bizarre because the atmosphere feels very packed and lived in, and the city's bustling and the streets are busy and stuff like that. But then you stop and talk to somebody, and it's just like, whoa, like there's like nothing behind their eyes. Like it's just, obviously you're playing a video game, you're not really dealing with anybody real here, but it just feels very phoned in, the interactions with certain people. And I have yet to find a character in, as far as I've gotten in the game, which again is just a couple of hours into it, but I've yet to find an interaction with a character or a character themselves that is actually interesting, that I actually care for, that I actually want to see succeed or want to see live, or if their lives were threatened, I'd be, worried for them. I just, yeah, I just don't care about the characters. I care about the idea of the characters. I care about the idea of KVS and the idea of the streets being so packed, and these people are going about their everyday lives and everything like that. Like I like the idea of all these things, but the game, it's almost like it knows what it wants, but then it just falls short in these things. And even in like the interactions with people's, like how I've said that like the movements are kind of stiff. So like people can be using their hands and talking, or like maybe moving around in dialogue, or even in a cutscene. It's bizarre. Their movements are just very kind of stiff and lifeless. But then also like there's this weird like pop in when like you're shifting from looking at Kay and she's talking to somebody else. When the camera shifts from Kay to the other person, there's like this weird pop in that happens where like they were moving before, like maybe they were moving around, moving their head or looking around at something, but then the moment the camera pans on them, it's like they like skipped like 3 frames and all of a sudden they're like jumped around, and I don't know, it's kind of hard to explain. But it's like the movements aren't very fluid, and the movements that do happen feel very stiff and forced. So it's, yeah, I mean, at this point I'm kind of nitpicking, but these are some of the things that I'm seeing in my first initial hours of the game that are just kind of concerning for the rest of the experience. But with some of the things with the actual gameplay itself, there are some great things to appreciate there. So in the gameplay, the actual stealth sections are fun. They're not perfect. I mean, there's times when I want to, hug a wall, or I want to try to like, um, I don't know, get into like a shadowy area. Maybe if I get into like tall grass or something like that, then I'll be kind of hidden from other enemies around me. But sometimes when you're trying to do certain actions, the game doesn't quite do what you want it to do. The grappling is like hit or miss. I mean, wow. You get a cool grappling hook, and it's cool to swing and, hook it onto a tree and swing over to the other side or whatever. It's great when it works, because there's times where I will do everything I'm supposed to, but I will just like be mid swing and then fall straight down. Like I just hit a wall and I fall straight down. Now, thankfully, the game doesn't like take you like super far back to have to redo that whole experience again, but it's just kind of annoying, and it just takes you out of the moment when that happens. So I don't know, not my favorite thing. But other things, like the stealth section, when it works, is great. It's great, coming up on like two enemies and figuring, okay, how can I knock out this one enemy while I can, send Nyx out, my kleptomaniac pet, to go and distract the other guard, or blind them so I can melee and take them out. So there's like cool like strategy with some of the stealth sections, but there's also not a whole lot of variety in them. I mean, there's pretty much, if you can manage the how you took down one situation over here with 2 or 3 people, you can pretty much just copy that same technique and do it over here. There's not really a whole lot of nuance to situations with enemies, or variety with situations with enemies. It's just kind of, you experienced it once, now you're experiencing it over here in a different room, or in a different building, or in a different planet, or in a different area. So it's just kind of, it's the same thing, but just appearance is different. And I do like that this game kind of feels like it pulled a lot from Uncharted. So there's a lot of sections where you can climb, and the movement in like the climbing feels very fluid and normal and natural. So I really appreciate that. It just immediately reminded me of Uncharted, and just being able to platform and things like that was great there. And so it's great having those aspects in this game, because honestly, I didn't even know that there were going to be stealth sections or platforming sections and things like that. I thought it was just going to be a basic story mode, and you're just kind of running and gunning against different enemies and stuff like that. So I'm glad that they at least added different layers to some of these things, where it's great that they added the stealth. They didn't execute it perfectly, but they at least tried and went for it, and I appreciate that. And the gameplay with the guns is great. So even the standard pistol that you have feels very heavy and real. I was very surprised, because I was just imagining just a light pistol that just can blast. It's not super strong and effective, but you can do knock out a bunch of blasts in a repetitive fashion. But the pistol that you're holding, even the base pistol, and of course you can get different weapons and stuff like that, but the base pistol has some heft and weight to it. Like, it actually feels like you're shooting something, and when you land a hit, you can actually feel like you're landing a hit. It doesn't feel kind of spongy and weird and just kind of out there in the ether. Like, it feels like you're actually hitting somebody. So that's great. I appreciate the heft and the realness to it. That's certainly appreciated. But again, with some of these things that they are attempting and trying to reach for, but not quite hitting the mark, it's very apparent in the first couple of hours in the game. And if it's going to continue to be like that, which a lot of the things that they are trying and attempting but not quite landing are not really things that can improve later on in the game, unless there's like some patch or something like that that kind of fixes some of like the graphical things with, like, people kind of popping in and out, or weird movements or stuff like that. Maybe some of those things can be fixed in a patch, but some things are just kind of indicative to like this is the game, this is the product, and this is your experience that you're going to have. And so, if you're noticing some of these things in the early hours of the game, some of these things you're just going to continue to experience throughout the game as well. So I don't know. I'm just very confused with this game because it's a mixed bag for me. I want to enjoy it, and I was so hyped putting it in the PlayStation and just playing it, starting it up for the first time. But then I got about 5 minutes into it, and I'm starting to notice some things that just kind of irk me a little bit. And I try not to be super like negative and high, critic, or like there's not a whole lot that you need to do to impress me. But some of the basic fundamental things, if you can't get some of the basics down, or at least get them more polished, then it's kind of like, what are we doing here? So, anyways, that's my initial thoughts on the game. If you liked this conversation, make sure that you hit that like button. That lets me know that you want to see more videos like this. If you want to see a full review when I actually finish the game, let me know down below in the comments. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss another video like this, and check out either one of these two flashing on the screen here. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.